What's up, everybody? Welcome to the latest edition of the Stephen A. Smith Show, coming at you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 1 p.m. Pacific over the digital airwaves of YouTube. I want to say thank you again, as always, to our official sports betting company, FanDuel, the official sports betting company of the Stephen A. Smith Show. Make sure to watch, to like, and follow the Stephen A. Smith Show on YouTube. Make sure to click the bell to get notified of all our new content. And be sure, as always, to pick up a copy of my New York Times best-selling book, Straight Shooter, a memoir of second chances and first takes. You know, I was really interested in talking to my next guest. My guest survived one of the worst school shootings in this nation's history. Since then, he's become a gun control activist and an emerging voice in politics. He is a co-founder of Leaders We Deserve. Please welcome David Hogg. Did I pronounce your name right? I wanted to make sure I pronounced it right. Is it David Hogg?
You did.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to meet you, my man. Thank you so much. First of all, is congratulations in order. I'm hearing that you're a new graduate from Harvard University. Is that true?
That is true.
All right. Congratulations, man. By the way, what did you study? Let me be a little bit nosy in that regard. What did you study there?
Well, I studied history.
Okay.
So I mainly American history, yeah.
I got you. You launched a new grassroots organization called Leaders We Deserved. First of all, tell us about when you started this grassroots organization and remind our audiences specifically why you elected to do that.
Yeah, so, I started an organization prior to Leaders We Deserve called March for Our Lives, and I started it with about 25 friends of mine after the shooting that happened at my high school in Parkland, Florida. And we're an organization dedicated to helping to turn out young people to vote and also advocating for stronger gun laws and a holistic approach to, how do we end gun violence? Not just how does somebody get a gun, but how do we prevent them from wanting to pick up a gun in the first place and harm other people? As part of that process, there was a young man I met who we hired to be our organizing director named Maxwell Frost, who a couple of years after we hired him told me that he was interested in running for Congress. And he was 24 years old at the time. And my first question was, you have to be 25 to be a member of Congress, right? And he said, yes, he knew. And he was going to be 25 by the time he was elected so he could serve. Worked on his campaign, and Maxwell Frost is now the first Gen Z member of Congress elected. I raised him about $380,000 in his first quarter, and he's the first Afro-Cuban person in Congress as well. And after that, I talked to his campaign manager, Kevin Lotto, and I said, it'd be really great if we could take this model and really focus on electing more young people to state legislatures and a couple more people to Congress as well. And that's why we started Leaders We Deserve. We're an organization dedicated to helping elect more young people to government, to elect more people that understand the anxiety of what it's like dealing with crushing student debt, the anxiety of what it's like to go through a school shooter drill, or worry about your children not having an inhabitable planet.
Just as a fresh reminder, it was Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2018. You were a senior at Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, and on campus when a 19-year-old former student of the school entered Building 12 and started shooting with a semi-automatic weapon, just to make sure I provide that level of clarity to our viewers and listeners at this particular moment in time. And I'm just thinking back to that particular moment in time, and you have a title like this, Leaders We Deserve. Some would sit up there and say the obvious. When you say Leaders We Deserve, it connotates that, we deserve better than what we have. There's some folks on Capitol Hill that just ain't getting it done. Speak to that, and we all know when it hit home for you, really. But as you really wanted to jumpstart this organization and ignite this movement, talk to me about why so many people should feel disgusted with what we're seeing from politicians on Capitol Hill.
I mean, the fact of the matter is, unfortunately, I don't need to explain it that much because everybody sees what's happening around them. We're seeing, the gutting of the middle class. We're seeing every day at this point, basically, school shootings happening on a weekly basis and daily gun violence in our communities that is not being covered a lot of the time. We're also seeing, what happened in Hawaii. We're seeing 100-degree water off the coast of Florida that is killing coral reefs and harming our planet and endangering the future of our children. And I think that ultimately is why we called it Leaders We Deserve. It's not to say that we haven't ever had leaders that we deserve in office. And we do have some currently, too, that are there like Maxwell. But it's to say that we haven't had enough. I think about people like the civil rights activist John Lewis, who we met with after Parkland, who some of the students met with after Parkland, who told us this is a marathon, not a sprint. And I think about how when he started, it was largely impossible for many people like him in the civil rights movement to get elected in the first place, but because of the decades of work that he put in with tens of thousands of other people, really millions of other people around the country, that he was able to get elected, and so many more people like Maxwell Frost were able to get elected in the first place. That's what we're trying to do here, is to elect more people that are morally just, that don't take corporate money, for example, that put the people's interest first and the special interest far after that.
But David, how are you going to pull that off? When we talk about corporate money, like when I think about, again, I'm looking at corporate America and I'm saying, excuse me, everything costs. Like, why are they after money? Because guess what? You know what? You got to pay. You want to run commercials. You want to go on the campaign trail, et cetera, et cetera. None of that is free. You want to run commercials, or it doesn't matter what network it is. They're charging you for the time and what have you. So when you talk about politicians not taking corporate dollars, is that really a reasonable expectation? Isn't that something that's like a pie in the sky kind of mentality, to think that you can have a sustained level of success if you don't have corporate dollars supporting you?
Well, I'll say this much, Stephen. We proved it with Maxwell Frost.
Yeah.
He was a 25-year-old who was elected and did not take, corporate PAC money in the first place. And that's part of the magic of what we're doing here with Leaders We Deserve. We're an organization that's really dedicated to helping bring the next generation into politics. And I'll be straight up with you. We're not trying to elect, 500 people right now and give them, just a little bit of money each to support them. We're really trying to work with 15 to 30 young people running for state legislature, where the races are a lot cheaper to fund, and then one or two members of Congress. And the beautiful thing about Leaders We Deserve is, one, we don't take corporate money, and two, a lot of the money that we get, we've gotten tens of thousands of donations from small dollars. The average donation that we've gotten is around $27, $25 from people all around the country that have supported us. When you have that kind of grassroots support, people who donate monthly, we can help elect more of those candidates, because I think ultimately, you're right, it might be hard. I don't think there will ever be a world where we can have every single campaign totally grassroots funded, so long as there's somebody else out there willing to take corporate money. But what we can do is elect more people and make it so unpopular to take corporate money, we can change the rules of the game and do things like change the Supreme Court so we can end Citizens United, which enabled, these politicians to be able to take so much of that corporate special interest money in the first place. Because ultimately, we do know that if we raise that standard and we say that you can't take that money and we make it illegal, then they can't.
Is it plausible that there's somebody out there, or have you encountered corporations out there that have come to you and said, wait a minute, we actually support your cause. We actually agree with you. Don't put us or lump us in the same categories, in the same category of these corporations that may be against such causes. And as a result, that's the kind of money you certainly don't want. Have you found corporations that have sided with you and really support your movement and wanted to contribute?
No, I have not. And I wouldn't take their money even if they did want to, because frankly, Stephen, there's no amount of good corporations or progressive CEOs that are out there that are going to get us out of the situation of corruption that we're in the first place. The problem that got us here is the fact that corporations can give to candidates, period. And that's taking money from a slightly better corporation. No matter what they say, is not going to get us out of here, because there's always going to be worse bad actors out there that are just directly driven by greed and profit in the first place, and not driven by what we are driven by, which is, electing morally just leaders like Maxwell Frost to reflect our generation. People like Avery Bishop, who is, the first woman of color to win Miss Texas, and if elected, to be the first Filipino woman in the Texas state legislature, because she just announced her campaign and she's the first candidate we're supporting. So that's what I would say to that.
The advent of social media has really taken fold in recent years, obviously. How much has that assisted in the level of success you guys have been able to enjoy? I only ask that question because I think about back to Barack Obama, and I'm saying if it were not for social media and his usage of it, I don't know if he would have won the election in 2008 or even 2012 against Mitt Romney. What are your thoughts about that? What can you tell us about the role that social media has played in sort of helping you advance your cause in terms of the support that it may have helped garner?
Well, I think it's been enormously helpful. I mean, Stephen, you of all people know that, right? Like, I've seen you out there with all the memes and everything of your commentary, and I love it. That's how I became aware of you in the first place. It's not because I watch a ton of sports personally, but it's because everybody loves your comments and your show.
Right.
Leaders We Deserve, and with March for Our Lives in particular, when we started after Parkland, a big asset that we were able to use was Twitter. A lot of the time in the past, you would have to get a lot of journalists to cover you, but ultimately we had so many young people supporting us on social media that we were able to get almost 1 million people to march with us in Washington, D.C. We've made March for Our Lives the largest youth-led movement in America since the anti-Vietnam War protests that happened during the 1960s. We've registered tens of thousands of young people to vote, and we've marched with them around the country, and we've seen the results, right? We have had the highest youth voter turnouts in American history in 2018, in 2020, and 2022. Now, it's still much lower than older age groups, but in comparison to how those groups voted when they were our age, 18 to 29 years old in that demo, we're voting a lot more, and we're voting very clearly in one direction.
Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. I'm gassed up for this upcoming season, y'all. I'm telling you that right now. I can hardly wait another second. And I know the best way to enjoy every single game, even if it's not your favorite team, is by putting down some bets, Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets. Win or lose, I don't see why you wouldn't get in on this opportunity and get your fill of all the spreads, the player props, the futures, the over and unders, all that stuff that makes the game that much more exciting. So visit FanDuel.com/SAS and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the National Football League.
Must be 21 plus and present in select states. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino, LLC. First online real money wager only. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued is non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Tennessee, and Virginia. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT-STEP to 53342 in Arizona. 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana. 1-800-522-4700 or visit ksgamblinghelp.com in Kansas. 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net in West Virginia or call 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York.
If I was to ask you what's the top 3 goals, what's the top 3 goals of Leaders We Deserve, what would they be?
Well, I think one, it's bringing a new generation into politics that understands that, we can work across the aisle and get things done at the same time. The partisan politics that we have in our country right now is not great for democracy. It's not great for our people in the first place. And I know from talking, obviously gun control, Stephen, is not the most non-controversial topic.
Right.
You can imagine. But, I joined the shooting club at my college. I've talked to many people who don't agree with me on everything. But you know what I find every time, even with most of the people who vehemently disagree with me, is that there is common ground that we can move forward on. While some people may not agree that, they don't think that a semi-automatic rifle like the AR-15 should be banned. They do think that we need more mental health funding for the 2/3 of gun deaths that are suicides. And that's something I'm willing to work together on to make progress on that in the first place. As for the other 2 goals, I think one of them is, weeding out a lot of the corruption in politics by funding grassroots campaigns, because I think that's ultimately what enabled groups like the NRA to block even research funding into gun violence prevention, right? I don't care, how left or right you are on this issue. Fundamentally, we should all agree that we need more information to understand what are the most policies to reduce gun violence. And the fact that the NRA actively lobbied for a law that prevented us from being able to even fund research at the CDC and NIH into one of the leading causes of death for people under the age of 19 in this country is horrible, right? And then the last thing I think is giving people hope. And I know that sounds kind of high in the sky and everything, but what I mean by that, Stephen, is that I think our generation has not been voting because we've been hopeful. I think it's because we're terrified. I think it's because we were very scared of the effect of Donald Trump and what we've seen happening over and over again with our country. But that's not enough. I know from being in these social movements and now working on the inside of politics more too, leadership is about a lot more than just being against something. You have to actually be for something. And that's what I'm trying to do here is I think by working with people like Justin Jones, who's on our advisory board, Maxwell Frost, and so many other people, that when young people see somebody like a Justin Jones in, office in Tennessee, they know that our political system is broken. We can all see that, but they also know that that does not mean it is unfixable, because there are people that are doing the right, leading the charge on the inside, like Justin Jones.
I was jumping in to interject because you talked about how you can work across the aisle and that there's compromise to be made and what have you. And I'm quite sure that there are people who've disagreed with you, obviously, but they're willing to work with you for the greater good. How do you explain the fact that in today's world, with these politicians on Capitol Hill, there's such a divide that exists now, compared to what you're aiming, obviously, to alleviate? I mean, when you think about it, the fact that youngsters like yourself have to be on the come up, and you're trying to literally highlight what doesn't need to be transpiring, what doesn't need to be taking place. And elder statesmen and women that exist in this world on Capitol Hill can't seem to do that. In your travels, why have you discovered things have regressed to that point on Capitol Hill? I imagine you had to have some idea, which is what also served to inspire you to want to take these positions.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, frankly, has to do with social media. I think the fact that somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene, a now congresswoman from Georgia,
I know she is,
followed me around when I was 18 years old, right after the shooting, screaming that, spreading conspiracy theories that the shooting at my high school didn't happen, right? Saying, that I was trying to take everybody's guns. Now, look, Stephen, I am a gun control advocate. I do think we need stronger gun laws, because I don't think that somebody like a mentally deranged and frankly racist 19-year-old like the shooter at my high school should be able to make multiple threats against my high school or any school and still be able to legally own a semi-automatic rifle or any gun for that matter in the first place, right? But she says all these crazy things, and I've been shooting guns since I was in 4th grade, right? There's a lot more nuance to this situation than people, I think, want to talk about. And when somebody like her comes along and tries to spread just false conspiracy theories about what happened at my high school, not only is that disrespectful, incredibly disrespectful to the families that lost children in the shooting at my high school, like Patricia and Manuel Oliver and so many others, it's also really bad for our country, because she is posing as a leader when really all she is somebody that is just trying to divide us further for her own benefit, so that she can raise more money off of chasing after somebody like me who, at the time wasn't even old enough to drink yet and had just gotten old enough to vote.
Wow.
And she was a +year-old woman. That type of immaturity.
I remember it. That's why I'm not interrupting you, because I remember it. I remember. It was all over television. We actually saw some of the nonsense that she was engaging in. Make no doubt about that. It's been more than 5 years since 17 of your classmates and school staff were gunned down at Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. As you reflect on that day, and certainly I'm not trying to dredge up memories, but I just think it's incredibly important that you let the audience know. Could you speak to how that day has affected you beyond the things that you've already articulated?
Steve, I think the way that it impacted me more than anything was it brought me off the sidelines. Before Parkland happened, I really wanted to be a broadcast journalist. And specifically what I wanted to do was cover, things like politics, because I thought both political parties were very corrupt and all politicians were corrupt. But what I learned from the shooting, from what I learned working in March for Our Lives, when we passed, gun laws in Florida, a state where they said that, you're a bunch of young people and it's great that you care and it's great that you're committed, but you can't change things here because this is Florida and the NRA owns this state. And we did change gun laws. I realized it is not simply enough to be against things and say everything sucks and therefore I'm not going to get involved, because that is not how you fix things. You actually have to propose something better and work towards it, right? And I think that's really the biggest way that it changed the trajectory of my life, is I realized it's not just enough to point things out. I got to get out there. I got to get involved with my classmates and so many others that have been doing the work for decades too. I'd be remiss not to bring up the fact that there are many people in, our movement in March for Our Lives specifically started before Parkland, because there were so many people, especially in Black and brown communities, like Erica Ford in Jamaica, Queens in New York, like Mike out in California, and so many others that have been leading this charge against gun violence for decades, right? And never have gotten the credit that they deserve, but laid the groundwork to help bring us up as a movement, and let, March come in and be part of that in the first place. And it's been really remarkable to see how, the movement started in Parkland, but it goes beyond Parkland. We have people from across the country involved in our organization that are impacted not just by school shootings, although of course I care about that, but are impacted by things like gun suicide, which is 2/3 of gun deaths, that are impacted by daily gun violence that disproportionately affects specifically young Black people way more than it does almost any other group in the country. And I realize that if Parkland is not safe, if Parkland is safe and other communities are not safe, we still have not done our job, because it shouldn't matter what the income is or what the racial demographics of your community looks like. No community should have to live in fear of gun violence inside or outside of their schools in the first place, no matter how the media chooses to cover one much more than the other.
Well, let me say a couple of things before I ask the next question. First of all, I really, really appreciate the positions that you've articulated, and I thank you a lot for it. I remember you criticized the coverage by the media of the Parkland shooting because you said it did not include a lot of the Black students. I appreciated your position on that. I certainly appreciate that just 4 days after the shooting, you and your classmates organized March for Our Lives in Washington, D.C. I thought that was a very profound moment in American history. And now thinking about the organization, and once again, just so everybody knows, Leaders We Deserve, that's your grassroots organization. You plan to make your first rounds of endorsements throughout the second half of 2023. I want to know, what areas of the country are you actually eyeing?
Well, for one, there's an election coming up in Virginia that's very important. Virginia is one of the few states in the South that is not banned abortion. But if we lose, a couple more seats, they're probably going to ban abortion. So that's one of the top states that we're looking to get involved in. I'm not prepared just yet to tell you who we're supporting there, but we're very excited in the next couple of weeks to let you know that. But we're also getting involved in states like Florida, in Texas, in Georgia, in North Carolina. Our whole philosophy here is that, there are so many states that get so much attention because they're very close to flipping. So for example, Michigan, Wisconsin, states like that. What we want to do with young people, we see investing in young people interested in making change, kind of like investing with time in the market with money, right? There's nothing that beats that, because over time, the effects that you have compound and become more consistent. And I think that's what we're trying to do. So we're trying to just have, we're trying to play the S&P 500 of change out here by not just supporting one candidate, but really 15 or 30 each cycle to help get them the resources that they need to get elected, and be that voice for young people and people of all ages too that we need in Congress or our state.
Last question before I let you get on out of here. Just doing my research, I love the fact that you wanted to emphasize you're not talking about grabbing people's guns. I love that you emphasize that you've been shooting, guns for quite a long time. You're not, so these right wingers that say you're not taking our guns away and all of that other stuff, that's not what you're talking about here. And so you're not talking about literally eradicating Second Amendment rights. And I think it's important to make that point. And I bring that up because I want to ask you this last question. You're going to run for office one day. That's what I'm saying. How soon is it going to be before we start looking at David Hogg and see him and Senator? I don't say Congressman because I don't want you in office for just 2 years. I want you in office at least 6 years. At least 6 years, okay, unless you're running for the presidency. Talk to me about your aspirations to be on Capitol Hill yourself in a very official capacity.
I've thought a lot about this, Stephen. And right now, when I was younger, I thought, when I'm 25, I want to run for Congress. But then I've just realized, this is so much bigger than just me. And if I can go out there and help elect more young people that reflect our generation, because frankly, there's a lot of guys that look like me on Capitol Hill. They might be a little older, but they look, I would much rather help elect more young women, especially young women of color and others around the country, to help, realize that this is not just about, me or Parkland or any one community or any one person. This is about a movement that is so much bigger than any one of us in the first place. And I think it's really important to note that, nobody is here to save us. There's no single person that's going to save us except each and every one of us. We have to save us as a generation and work across the generations too, with the wisdom of older generations and the power of younger generations to build an intergenerational network moving forward for justice for all communities and safety for all communities in the first place. So right now, I'm not planning on running, but I am planning on helping these candidates who are running in the first place. And if you want to get involved with that, if you're a young person who's interested in working on gun violence prevention, you can go to marchforourlives.com. And if you're interested in supporting our efforts to help elect more young people, which I see as like kind of the second phase of the movement, first we had to wake up our generation. We had to turn out and vote. Now we have to run, right? They say run, hide, fight to survive a school shooter. I think our generation needs to repurpose that. We need to start running for office. We need to stop hiding from the responsibility. We have to protect all communities from gun violence. We need to start fighting for a future where all communities are safe and they have the resources that they need so that no young person feels the need to pick up a gun in the first place. Because it's not just about how they get the gun. It's about why does a young man especially feel the need to pick up a gun in the first place? How can we act proactively and not just reactively? Instead of just funding more cops or anything like that, how can we get their community and their schools the resources they need in order to make sure that they don't feel the need to turn towards that? So if you're interested in working with Leaders We Deserve, or potentially even running for office yourself, if you're a young person, you can go to leaderswedeserve.com.
The man who launched the grassroots organization, Leaders We Deserve, the one and only David Hogg, right here with Stephen A. Smith. Thank you for joining the show. Good luck in your future endeavors. I'll definitely keep an eye out for everything. I love your message. I think it's right on point, and I think you're one of the perfect people to articulate the message that you've been articulating. I'm really impressed with everything that you've had to say. I certainly received an education today, and I thank you for providing it, my man. Thank you so much, man. Pleasure to meet you.
Appreciate you too.
All right. The one and only David Hogg right here with Stephen A. Okay. I love what he's saying. Making a lot of valid points. He really, really is. And when you experience the kind of things that he experienced, the fact is most of us sit back and watch. We whine and moan and bitch. We complain, and then we don't do anything. We don't give a voice for the voiceless. We don't speak on behalf of those who can't speak for themselves. We don't fight on behalf of those who can't fight for themselves, that are relatively helpless. He clearly is not one of those people. So I think he should be applauded for what he's doing, what he's trying to do. I definitely appreciate the fact that he stopped by the show. I admire what he and other young people are setting out to do, because I think it's very, very important. After all, the future is in their hands. We got to call it like we see it. The future is in their hands. Not ours. I'm 55. Okay? I'm on the other side now. Okay, I ain't far on the other side, but I'm on the other side now, okay? These young thoroughbreds, every time something happens in history, it's young people who spark it. It's young people who ignite the flame and bring attention to things that need to be brought attention to, or have attention brought to it. So David Hogg is one of those people. I think that we're going to hear a lot from him in the years to come. He's special. You can tell. Thanks again to him for joining the show. And thanks to you all for watching another episode of the Stephen A. Smith Show. You can watch me every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific, over the digital airwaves of YouTube. Make sure to click the bell to get notified of all of our new content. And be sure to pick up a copy of my New York Times bestseller, Straight Shooter, a memoir of second chances and first takes. Appreciate the love. Appreciate the support. Keep it coming, and I'll keep on coming. Until next time, everybody, this is Stephen A. signing off. Peace and love.